Well, good evening and welcome to this week's call for platform launchers. It's good to have you with us, or I'm glad to have you with us this evening. Right now on the call live with me, we have members from our members club, and I think we have every region of the country represented tonight. We have a really good showing of people here this evening, people from the East Coast, people from the North, people from the South, Midwest. We also have West Coast. We've got pretty much the entire United States represented on tonight's call, which is really cool. And I certainly love seeing that. We're going to be talking about a very relevant subject here if you're in the process of developing a platform. Tonight, we're talking about creating a success path for your online community. And I'm going to show you what this is and how it applies and how I'm personally using it right here with platform launchers. Now, when I started platform launchers, what I wanted to do was I wanted to create an online community and an online hub where people could learn how to develop a thriving online platform. This was a question that I was getting from many different directions. And typically people would ask me these questions in pieces. I would get questions about starting a podcast, or questions about writing a book, or questions about developing a blog, or advertising, or other monetization questions. And eventually over time, I realized what people were actually asking me about was, what does it look like to have a multifaceted online platform that was doing well, something that was thriving. And so when I started platform launchers, it was with the goal of trying to help people understand some of the steps that go into developing something like that. And since developing platform launchers and starting it and launching it, I've been very encouraged with the progress that our members have been making and the content that they're creating. I find it very impressive. And in fact, just before we started our podcast here, we were having a conversation as a group and just sharing some of our wins. And it's encouraging to hear some of the things that people are doing to really build upon what they've already done. And then some of the things that people are doing where they're just starting things up for the very first time and beginning that process of gaining traction. So it's very encouraging. And I find it very impressive as well to see some of the things that people are doing. And several of our members are in the process of developing online communities. And one of our members, Rich Avery, and by the way, if you're not familiar with his platform, it's morethanapastor.com, and he helps pastors with additional sources of income and career decisions. But Rich Avery asked me to share a few of my opinions about developing a success path for those who follow your online content. That's something that he has with his platform. That's something that I have with mine. And so we were sharing some ideas about this. And I'll tell you, the first time I remember hearing the phrase success path was in a webinar that I attended that was hosted by Stu McLaren. I don't know if you're familiar with that name. He certainly gets around and certainly appears on a lot of podcasts and different places. But Stu is basically known as an expert on the subject of membership communities. So a few years ago, when I listened to him share some of these things, I paid very careful attention to the things that he was recommending, because I know that he's been doing it for quite a while. And one of his big recommendations, one of my big takeaways when I heard Stu speak, was his recommendation that you have a step-by-step journey that you can lead your members through that will help them succeed at what they're creating. And so he talked about this idea. He called it a success path. That's what we're calling it tonight as well. But it's this idea of having that step-by-step journey that you can lead your members through that will help them succeed at whatever they're creating or whatever skill you're attempting to teach. Now, if you've been following my blog, so I know some of you probably read the blog, and obviously if you're listening to this right now, you're familiar with the podcast. If you've been following either of those sources of content, you may already be familiar with the success path that I developed for our community, because it follows a very logical process of platform development. And I tried to phrase the 5 steps of platform development that I have as part of platform launchers in an easy to remember manner. And so I call my success path the 5 Ds of platform development, the 5 Ds of platform development. And those 5 are, first of all, discover your message, then deliver your content, then develop your tribe, then deploy your team, and finally derive your income. And they follow a very logical pattern. You have to first discover your message before you can figure out how you're going to deliver that content. And then once you figure out what your message is and you start delivering the content, you try to figure out, how do I want to deliver it? Do I want to deliver it with a blog at first and then maybe a podcast? Or do I want to incorporate video or social media? Do I want to offer coaching? How do I want to deliver that content? So you wrestle with that. Once you figure out your system for delivering content, you move toward developing a tribe of people that are using the content. And so that's where you're investing in people over and over again and trying to help them get to know one another. Fourth thing is you deploy a team. If you want it to scale, if you want it to grow, you need to start bringing outside people in that can work with you and become part of your team. And then the fifth thing, and I purposely have this as fifth on my list, is deriving your income, because I think deriving an income is a very natural occurrence once you develop something that's quality and it has that solid foundation. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of just trying to derive an income from something that they haven't even developed. And so those are the 5 Ds of platform development, and the order that I encourage people to follow them: discover your message, deliver your content, develop your tribe, deploy your team, derive your income. I think it's very easy to keep in mind. So when I interview guests and when I have experts on my podcast, I ask them questions about these 5 steps. When I answer questions from our members during our members club meetings, I keep bringing the group back to these 5 steps, because each of the questions is going to fall somewhere in one of those 5 steps. When I'm coaching people who reach out to me for coaching, I walk them through what these steps look like in their specific situation. And I like this process because it's logical and it leads to healthy results, and it outlines the exact process I've been using to develop what I'm personally building online. This is the pattern that I follow. This is the pattern that I find that works. And like I said, I think it's a very logical pattern. But I'm not the only one who uses a success path to help people make progress. One of the most popular success paths that I'm sure many of you have already heard of are the steps that Dave Ramsey encourages his readers and his listeners and his members to take as they basically try to improve their personal finances. And Dave calls them his baby steps. And by the way, just a few months ago, back in November, I had a chance to spend 3 days with Dave Ramsey and his team, seeing a behind the scenes look at all the things that they're building and things that they're working on. And I'll tell you what, it was refreshing to know that the public message and the public persona is authentic, that Dave and the team actually do follow the steps that they recommend to others, and they let us and a small group of others kind of come and see some of the behind the scenes of things that they were doing. I always think that it's nice when you meet people that you look up to and discover that they're the real deal. And so I can testify they're the real deal. And his steps include this. And by the way, I'm a big fan of these steps. I've used them. But he says, all right, step 1, save $1,000. Step 2, use the debt snowball method to pay off all consumer debt except your mortgage. Step 3, save up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Step 4, invest 15% of your household income into retirement. Step 5, save for your children's college fund. Step 6, pay off your home early. And then step 7, build long-term wealth and be generous with it. And so, I looked at his steps and I thought, boy, that's really logical. And that's something that I found immensely helpful. And my wife and I, we put it into practice and it really helped us. And so that's a popular success path, by the way, that was utilized before he even had a membership or an online community. That was something he would share in his radio show and share in his books. Now he's actually running a membership. But even before he had a membership, he was encouraging people to follow that success path because that's what seemed to work. Now, if you're developing some sort of a success path that you are trying to incorporate into your platform in one respect or another. So I just gave you my example. I gave you Dave Ramsey's example. One of my favorite aspects of a success path is that it shows you what to focus on today instead of encouraging you to worry about tomorrow. So if you're on step 3, don't even worry about step 4. It's almost like step 4 doesn't even exist until you've completed the step you're on. So don't even worry about the next step. And I encourage you, if you're following the 5 Ds of platform development and you're on step 2, don't even worry about step 3. If you're on step 1, don't even worry about step 2. Just focus on the step that you're on. And when you've mastered that step, then move on. Because if you're able to compartmentalize steps, you're going to find that very helpful. I certainly find it very helpful to just be able to compartmentalize these things and not get overwhelmed with thinking about all the steps at once. I found that very helpful when I was developing my own platform. I also found it very helpful when I began walking through Dave Ramsey's baby steps. And like I said, my wife and I, we followed his recommendation and it worked for us. And I think it was because when I was on step 2, I didn't have to worry about step 3. I wasn't worried about an emergency fund at that point. I was worried about the debt snowball and so on. And so you just kind of do it one step at a time, but it actually allows you to gain some traction. So the principle I'm encouraging us to do is don't worry about the next step. Just focus on whatever step you're on. But that's the benefit. If you develop a success path for your platform and you're walking people through it, what you're doing is you're giving them permission not to worry about a million future things. You're helping them to stay focused on the spot that they're on. And if that can happen, then they can be focused on that and they could actually gain some traction. And when you're following a success path, what I think you also get to do is you get to celebrate the progress that you're making. If you're following just a scattered approach, it becomes very hard to celebrate success because you aren't really sure where you are on the journey. But if you're celebrating, if you're walking along a success path, if you're following a success path, it allows you to actually celebrate the progress that you've been making. This is the right order if you want to actually see results. Now, let me say this about platform development. Platform development is a gradual process. It gets better in time as you continue to take consistent action. And if you're following a well-developed success path, you'll be shown the right order to actually produce results. I didn't gain real financial traction until I followed Ramsey's baby steps, but the same could also be said with platform development. Until I understood the steps I needed to follow, my progress was slow and my progress was scattered. But having a success path and then following it out, it actually made the process much smoother and much more effective. So think about your platform for a second. Think about something that you're working on, whatever the message is that you're trying to convey, whatever group you're trying to lead, whatever content you're trying to produce. If you're developing something like an online community, or if you're trying to train and teach people about something very specific, I'm just curious, and just answer this in your head for a second. Have you outlined a success path that's easy to remember and no more than 7 steps? So something that's easy to remember and no more than 7 steps. So in my context, I've got 5 steps and they're all D's, right? Discover your message. And then it goes all the way from that to ultimately deriving an income. And it's just D after D after D. 5 easy things to remember. But if you can present something like that to your readers and to your listeners and to your members, what you're going to do is you're going to enable them to experience success at a much quicker rate. You'll also be able to give them better counsel because you'll be able to use the success path that you've outlined and that you've tested and that you've been using and that you've seen other people use. You could use that to assess their needs and the progress that they're making. It could be useful for whatever you're teaching or questions that you're trying to answer. Or if you offer coaching, I think if you offer coaching, having a success path baked into your platform makes a lot of sense. I think you'll actually be able to provide much better coaching if you kind of understand where someone is on that path and where you're trying to help them ultimately get to. Now, at this point, I'm going to switch things over to our members club, and we're going to have a discussion. Those of you listening on the podcast, I always appreciate the fact that you're with us each week, and each week is we've been producing this content. We've been watching the download numbers continue to grow. So we know you're out there. We're grateful for you. And by all means, check in with us at some point. Send us a message. Send me a message, john@platformlaunchers.com. I'd love to know that you're out there. And I take the time to respond to every message that comes in. So don't hesitate to reach out. But what you're about to see or kind of notice that we're doing, we end the podcast here. We record the podcast, by the way, in front of, they used to say with sitcoms, in front of a live studio audience. That's how this podcast is recorded. There's a live studio audience. We have our members club live on the call. They're just so patient during our teaching time. But as soon as we pause the podcast, we jump right into our discussion on how to apply these concepts to our platforms. And so if you're a podcast listener and you want to give this a try and join us sometime, we'd love to invite you on our membership and invite you to take a 2-week test drive so you can do that for free. And then if you discover Platform Launchers is a good fit for you, we'd love to welcome you to be part of the group. Maybe you'll even represent a new state or a new part of the United States or a new part of the world that we don't yet have represented in the members club. And we'd love to have you on board. Just stop over at platformlaunchers.com and take that test drive. But podcast listeners, we're about to say goodbye, and we will catch you again next week.